Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Waite. I'm a professor here at the University of Nebraska, and I am the founder of the Drone Journalism Lab here at the university. It was the first drone journalism lab anywhere in the world, and we had the very radical idea that we were going to use small unmanned aircraft to do journalism. And for all of our troubles, we were shut down by the Federal Aviation Administration with a cease and desist order. Uh, if you ever have the chance to be shut down by the government with a legal document, I highly recommend it. It is an exhilarating experience, something you'll never forget. But seriously, it did scare the pants off of me. I called them up and asked them, what did we do wrong and how do we fix it? And what they explained to me was, we just didn't do paperwork. What they said was that paperwork that we needed to do wasn't a big deal. We just had to fill it out, and it would take a little bit of time, but we would eventually get permission from them to fly drones. So I thought, great, I'm going to do that. So I filled out the paperwork. The paperwork took a year to fill out. It was not easy at all, and it was extremely technical and complicated. In that year that it took me to fill that paperwork out, the FAA had changed its mind. Originally, they said, you're a university, you're a state university, so you're an agent of the government, and therefore you need government permission. Then they decided in that year of that I was filling out paperwork that actually universities and journalism schools particularly are not agents of the government. We're something different. And so to fly a drone, we had to become a commercial entity. And to become a commercial entity, somebody in the organization had to have a manned aircraft pilot's license. Somebody had to go learn how to fly an airplane. So guess what I did 2 years ago? I went out and I got a pilot's license, and I can fly an airplane now, so that I can fly a $1,000 hunk of plastic on the ground. That is not the most efficient way to go about it, and indeed it was very expensive. It was about $10,000 for me to get the pilot's license. And while I was getting the pilot's license, the FAA came up with new rules for commercial operators that didn't require it. So I got a pilot's license for nothing. And now in the United States, regular commercial flight operations are allowed under a law called Part 107. If you ever hear people talking about that, that's what they're talking about. It's regular drone rules. Those rules allow you to fly to about 120 meters or so, a little bit more than that. You can fly during the day, you can't fly at night. You cannot fly over people, and you have to have permission to fly in restricted airspace. So if you are near an airport, I should say controlled airspace, if you're near an airport, if you're within a few miles of an airport, you are in what's called controlled airspace, where air traffic control is talking to and guiding airplanes into the airport. If you're in that airspace now, you have to have permission from air traffic control. The FAA does not want drone pilots talking to air traffic control, so they make you fill out a form on the internet, and it can take 90 days to get a response back from them about whether or not you can fly in a place. Well, for stories that we have lots and lots and lots of leeway, that's no problem. That's not a big deal. For breaking stories that are going on right now, if the building across the street from mine is on fire right now, I can't do anything about that. I can't go outside and fly because I can't get permission from the Air Traffic Control Authority to go fly. That has created a situation in the United States where you have a lot of people who are breaking the rules. Not many journalists. Journalists know that their work is going to be scrutinized. They know that their work is going to be published, so they avoid doing that. But it means that operators that don't necessarily care about the law, they are going and flying illegally. They are going and flying in places they're not supposed to be flying, and it's creating a real problem. There's a solution coming that will be automated flight updates. You'll pull out your smartphone, you'll pull up an area where you want to fly, you'll say what altitude you want to fly to, you'll hit a button, it'll send your request off to the FAA, and within a few minutes they'll give you a response back saying yes, you can fly, or no, you can't fly. That will change things dramatically in the United States, because flying in controlled airspace, there are a lot of airports in cities, and there's a lot of news going on in those controlled airspaces. This is going to change things in the United States dramatically, and a lot of restrictions are going to be away. They're going to be gone. Um, there are other restrictions that are hard to deal with, like flying over people. So we can't use them to cover large protests if we're going to fly over the protests. We would have to constrain ourselves over open ground, which is not difficult. We can do that. It just requires some creativity. But flight over people is something that a lot of journalists want, because journalism is about people. We want to do stories about people. Um, a lot of the most successful drone stories that you have seen here in the U.S. have been out of hurricanes in Houston, Texas, and in Florida. They have been more recently with giant wildfires going on in Northern California, where you can see neighborhoods that have been destroyed by these fires and the sort of desolate landscape that's been left behind. Those are the stories that drones are best for. Drones do well in stories that have large spatial extent. And what I mean by that is large events that go on for a long, long ways. If you've ever been a journalist, you've ever had to write down a description of something that extends on and on and on into the horizon, that's just so large it almost defies imagination. You know that it's difficult. It's very difficult to come up with the words to be able to do that. But a drone flying no more than even 30 meters in the air can captivate an audience. It can show people how big and how far something goes in a way that is really, really difficult on the ground. Um, Journalists here in the United States, and indeed journalists all over the world, are discovering this power that drones have. They're also discovering a lot of the hassles. The United States, for good or ill, tends to be a leader in the world of aviation regulation. On drones, they lag behind. There are actually several neighbor countries to you, in Chile and Brazil, that had rules long before the FAA did. There were other countries in the world, many European countries. Australia was a world leader for a time. Japan was a world leader for a time. Canada had far, far better rules and regulations than the United States did for years. What you are seeing now is a broader consensus forming around what drone rules will be in most countries. Most countries around the world now require some form of license. That license generally involves some sort of test that you have to take. In some countries, that's a written test. The United States is just a written test. You do not actually have to fly a drone for the FAA to get a drone license. You don't have to demonstrate any ability. There are a handful of other countries that are that way. Many more countries do have that same written test you have to take, but you also have to do some sort of flight capability. You have to show that you can actually fly the drone for the Civil Aviation Authority in that country. These rules change so fast all over the world and are changing all the time that it is extremely difficult to keep up with. The rules in one country one year are different the very next. They can change almost on a moment's notice. Canada changed their rules very suddenly about 8 months ago now, I believe, where it used to be fairly easy to fly in Canada. It used to be fairly unrestricted to fly in Canada, and now it's really, really difficult, particularly for people who are not from Canada and are trying to come into the country and fly. The U.S. is suddenly falling somewhere in the middle in terms of how difficult or easy it is to fly here for journalism or for any business purpose, really. Those obstacles, I think, are going to decrease all over the world as more businesses use drones to make money, to do things that are valuable in society, that help tell a story or help inform the public or change government policy or improve crop yields in agriculture, all kinds of things. The more data we have showing how safe these devices can be, I think you'll see more and more restrictions fall away. Many other countries than the United States have far more refined notions of privacy rules. The United States has privacy rules, but they are broken up by state, and those privacy rules are very, very poorly understood by most Americans. You can ask them if they have a constitutional right to privacy, and many of them will say yes, they do not. Privacy doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution. It wasn't until the late 1800s that the idea of a right to privacy in the United States actually came around. Um, Other countries are different. Other countries have much stronger societal pressures on those rights to privacy. Those tend to be fairly substantial obstacles to a flying camera, to a drone that can go over fences, that can fly through neighborhoods. Um, my personal opinion is that too is overblown. We have a lot of people that are afraid of people using drones to spy on people. We have very, very few examples of it actually occurring. In many countries, specific drone rules are being put in place to block people from violating privacy with drones without any examples of it actually going on. So we're making things that have never happened illegal before they actually happen, before they're actually a problem. The other thing is most countries' privacy rules already deal with drones. Most states in the United States, their privacy rules already deal with drones. So in a lot of ways, lawmakers are making illegal things illegal to stop something that has never really been a problem. So another area, another obstacle that a lot of countries face is issues of private property. How much space above property that somebody else owns is owned by them, and where does the sky start? Where does the public space that we call the sky begin over private property? There has never been a successful case tried in court that deals with trespassing from the air. So if you fly over somebody's property, nobody's been successfully convicted of trespassing in a court. Several courts have said there actually is no such thing as aerial trespass, but it's not firmly established. But I think we all agree that as a homeowner, we want to control some area above our property. We don't want aircraft to be flying over our backyards at 10 feet above the ground, 3 meters above the ground. We want some control there. But where that line gets drawn is going to be different in every country. It's going to be different in every society, and is a conversation that all of these societies need to have. So there are legal obstacles, both regulatory, privacy issues, and private property issues. But in most places, those are surmountable issues. We can get a drone in the air, and we can get useful, amazing video that shows people where they live in a different way, that can reveal things in interesting ways, that can show them how something is evolving that impacts them. How this will all evolve is a really great question because technology is evolving as quickly as we can imagine it. Where I see drone technologies in storytelling evolving is not in video and photo. It does not take a great leap of imagination to envision why a flying camera will be useful, why photo and video from the air is exciting. So that's obvious. That's not hard to do. Where I think the non-obvious uses for journalism, for storytelling, are going to be in investigative journalism, in accountability journalism, and also in virtual reality. I can foresee journalists using drones to use multispectral cameras and image an area with bands of the infrared spectrum. So they can look at the effects of government decisions on the environment. How has this construction project changed the way water flows in an area, or how has this affected the vegetation in the area? How has this affected all kinds of things that we can discover through multispectral imagery? We can use them to map areas very quickly, pretty much on demand. So we can chart change over time through geospatial technologies to hold governments accountable for their decisions. I think we'll also see the virtual reality realm come about where we can use a drone to fly over an area and gather hundreds and hundreds of images of a given site. We can take those photos and we can put them together into a high resolution. We're talking sub-centimeter levels of accuracy, um, three-dimensional model of that place. And then we can use technologies like the Oculus Rift and other virtual reality technologies, and we can actually let people walk through a place where news has occurred. So imagine being able to take people to a small village in Puerto Rico right now and image that village in virtual reality and then place it in virtual reality and let people walk through there as if they were there, and use voice technologies or other technologies to let people discover stories in those virtual spaces. I think we can change how people view stories, how people view tragedies, how people view natural disasters using that virtual reality technology. That's a little bit far out there because the accessibility of that technology is fairly low right now. Um, where you're going to see most of that coming about is on phones, which are a sort of limited capability right now, but that's coming. It's all coming. And the ability of storytellers to build the actual environment where news has occurred and place people in it and let them explore it, I think is an extremely powerful thing. Um, so that's everything that's going on here in the drone lab right now. We are trying to train journalists in how to become federally certified, how to get their license, how to overcome these obstacles. We are training journalists how to shoot better video. We are also trying to figure out what the best way to use these virtual reality technologies or these mapping technologies for investigative journalism, how to do that, and then how to train journalists on that. So thank you very much for having me. I wish I could be there with you. I wish I could experience a country that actually knows how to make the World Cup, unlike my own. I wish you well in your conference and take care. Goodbye.